Brexit. The left versus the right.
In this country did not vote for Brexit, and even more did not vote for the no-deal Brexit that, unfortunately, Mrs May appears willing to deliver.
It's probably the most fundamental part of politics, and because of Brexit, it is throwing up all kinds of questions over where Brexit stands on this imaginary scale of left and right in politics. So let's explain what constitutes a left-wing politician versus a central politician versus a right-wing politician, and how they stand on Brexit. Even if you don't agree with me, consider subscribing by the end of the video. Now, the terms left and right were actually coined during the French Revolution. Those who didn't support the monarchy and were in favour of the revolution itself sat on the left of the French Estates General, and those who favoured the old regime of the French kingdom sat on the right. This raises the question of where to put Brexit on the traditional left-right scale. On the one hand, Brexit opposes the establishment in favour of a kind of revolution, while on the other, it favours an older British Empire-like vision of the world. There's no way of knowing how our monarchy feels about Brexit, so this means updating the terms a little bit into what's become known as left and right-wing politics. If you're on the left of politics, you're more likely to believe in social equality, egalitarianism, and you're more likely to be in opposition to a social hierarchy. They include groups of thinking like socialism, communism, and theocracy. You believe everybody should be equal. If you're on the right of politics, you're more likely to believe that social hierarchies are an inevitable side effect of life, or even a desirable thing for someone or something to have more power than somebody or something else. You believe in movements like capitalism, classical liberalism, and constitutional republicanism. You believe people taking charge. The centre ground of politics accepts a degree of balance between both social equality and social hierarchy. These include movements like liberalism, conservatism, and progressivism. For example, the centre-right would agree with some capitalism for economic growth, but agree to a living wage for all workers. The centre-left would agree with going to war when necessary, but only doing so in an effort to introduce or restore an equal democratic society. The biggest problem with the centre ground of politics in modern day British politics is that it's been met with a lot of betrayal. Tony Blair famously led the UK into the Iraq War, which did the opposite of creating equality for the people of Iraq, and the resulting reactionary terrorism only heightened resistance from the right of politics. David Cameron introduced gay marriage rights, but at the same time introduced austerity, a move which made many associate one with the other, and made people either brand the Conservatives as secretly on the right of politics, or made people associate equality with disparity for the white British man, and divided some further towards the right of politics. The resulting effect of those governments was the rise of socialism and a move in parts of the Conservative Party further towards the right, towards UKIP. Today, out of the two main parties of Conservative and Labour are four main political positions. Socialism and conservatism is what the front benches associate with, but centrism is what the independent group describe themselves as, while UKIP, the Brexit Party, and the ERG could be described as on the right of politics. The current left of politics might even go as far as describing Tommy Robinson as a fascist. That's somebody who dictates strong regiment and forcibly suppresses opposition thinking, while the right see PC culture as within this bracket.
We did not convince millions of natural Labour voters, especially in those parts of the country left behind. Left behind by years of neglect, underinvestment and deindustrialisation. Now we have to face the future together. We're not helped by patronising or lecturing those in our communities who voted to leave. We have to hear their concerns.
Socialism is the belief in social ownership. For example, the public ownership and state funding of services like the rail service. It explains why the current Labour government wants a version of Brexit that protects workers' rights, because socialism supports the belief that profit should be spread amongst workers based on their contribution. You work hard, you get paid more. If you can't work, they believe your needs should be protected, which is where the economic uncertainty of Brexit, and especially no deal, comes into conflict with their politics. Under socialism, if society needs jobs to be done that nobody wants to do, it offers a higher compensation to make them worthwhile. Labour wanting to protect workers' rights is one of their tests of Brexit. A socialist also believes in protecting the environment. But socialism completely ignores those of us in society who are not cooperative and are more competitive. Competitive people will overthrow and disrupt society for their own gain. Capitalism harnesses a greed is good vibe, while socialism pretends it doesn't exist. Socialism also gives the government more power because they own more. As we've seen in the Venezuelan government, leaders can abuse this position and claim power for themselves.
If you're from an ordinary working class family, life is much harder than many people in Westminster realise. You have a job, but you don't always have job security. You have your own home, but you worry about paying the mortgage. You can just about manage, but you worry about the cost of living and getting your kids into a good school. If you're one of those families, if you're just managing, I want to address you directly. I know you're working around the clock. I know you're doing your best, and I know that sometimes life can be a struggle. The government I lead will be driven not by the interests of the privileged few, but by yours.
A conservative believes in capitalism to increase competition and boost the economy. Everyone can keep all the money they make, and there is no regulation around how much they can make. This is great for Brexit because it means companies can come in and compete to make the most out of the UK trade deals. But conservatism also means that wages could be low, social programs and benefits can be cut, businesses can get away with anything, such as tax avoidance, and the rights of citizens don't apply. This means that under a conservative government, Brexit could mean a race to the bottom, where food standards and regulations are dropped so much that UK farmland can be bought out easily, and the workers who work the land and the environment suffer as a result. Under the withdrawal agreement, the government has to adopt EU customs rules to maintain frictionless trade at the border, which means regulations imposed by the European Court of Justice. But the right wing of the party, the ERG, will be happy with a no-deal scenario where this kind of drop in regulation could occur.
The rules were fully applied, were they? So just remind me, what was Italy's debt to GDP ratio when it joined the euro with these fully applied rules? Did it meet the Maastricht criteria?
Too high, but they have been put also under procedures that were.
But it didn't meet the rules, did it?
No, sorry.
No. So the rules were flexed. So the rules are the rules when the EU wants them to be the rules, and therefore it's saying these will be the rules because we want to impose a hard border.
The ERG, or any right-wing organisation, hold freedom in their highest regard, allowing for prosperity. They believe in less regulation and less bureaucracy, which is why they support a no-deal Brexit. They believe in a tougher stance on crime too, and a protection of traditional values. The tougher stance on crime may well create an environment where people feel the state is unjustly punishing society, and it might have the opposite effect of decreasing crime rates. Minority communities, such as European migrants, would take less priority under a right-wing government. Under a right-wing government, the government could hoard money, and they are more gung-ho when it comes to going to war, which isn't great with the continent facing a major Syrian refugee crisis. But neither is the alternative of simply letting them in.
You have a leader who backed up and promoted an anti-Semitic mural. You have a leader who has talked about Jewish people not having an English sense of irony. You have a leader who has attended a wreath-laying ceremony for terrorists.
Do you think he's anti-Semitic?
And on top of that, you've got a party which is, it calls disciplining someone. So there have been people who've been guilty of egregious anti-Semitism, and the sanction is just being reminded of the guidelines.
So do you think that
That is not a party taking it seriously. I don't know whether he is anti-Semitic? I don't know whether he is personally anti-Semitic. His actions would seem to suggest he's got questions to answer on that front. But I've been very clear, the Labour Party is institutionally anti-Semitic, and you either put your head in the sand and you ignore it, or you actually do something about it. And the failure to do something about it, just for me, I just found it made my position untenable.
Which brings us on to the independent group and centrist politics. In centrist politics, you get the best of both worlds, a free market and a welfare state. Minorities like the European migrants can be respected. People who have property can get more wealth, and free trade will allow them to access new markets. They are open-minded and believe nobody is above the law. But as we've seen in the years leading up to Brexit, the markets won't change to be the most efficient when left to their own devices. The country is incredibly divided, such as in how Scotland or the North feels versus compared to London. Union and working rights could be discouraged under the independent group, making people poorer. Under a centrist government, there might not be enough change in equality law to deal with the divisions of the country. Under a centrist government, the markets can grow unpredictably, which leads to growth being too fast or too slow. Ultimately, if there is another economic crisis, which some economists might expect after Brexit, people will panic, and a centrist government will not have the ideological certainty to be able to make a clear action towards the left or the right of politics. Even if the independent group got their wish to be able to stop Brexit, they can only highlight the divisions this country faces. They can't solve it because they don't appeal directly to the Conservatives or the Socialists. But do you agree with me? Join in the debate below and subscribe.